We move right along to science, reason, and the presidential candidates, presented by Glenn Church. I'm not even going to talk about the description. We're not doing the descriptions. We're just doing the intro. So let's bring Glenn up here with a round of applause. Glenn Church, going to educate us on what we need to think.
Well,
sort
hopefully not. What am I supposed to do here?
Right, this one.
Right here?
Oh, right, yeah.
Does it click
Not there, because it'll make noise when you move.
up here?
That's fine.
Okay.
And then you know how to...
I know how to do that. And this thing I need to here. I don't usually carry a lot of paperwork up here, but I shall this time because I don't want to get apply quotes to the wrong people. So, which we just learned is not a good thing to do.
You have to tar and feather you.
Yes. So, good morning, everyone. My name's Glenn Church, and as Mark said, I'm going to talk a little bit about politics and skepticism. And here we are. It's 2016, and we're right in the midst of this great American quadrennial tradition called the presidential election campaign. You know, theoretically, this is when we select some great leaders like a Washington, a Jefferson, Lincoln, Teddy Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt, along that nature. Unfortunately, this time around, we have the likes of Donald Trump, Ben Carson, and believe me, we have a slew of scientifically challenged politicians to choose from. So I had quite a number of issues I could have brought up here, stem cell research, nuclear power, things to look at. But I picked on, so I got this right. Yeah, there we go. Picked on these 5 because I felt they gave a broad scope of different issues. And I felt they also generally give a perspective of how you would apply skepticism to politics, because really skepticism is a process. It's not an end result. You can get 2 skeptics that can look at an issue, and theoretically they're supposed to look at things with critical thinking, and you can come up with 2 different solutions, and that's perfectly fine. We just want to try to get people to look at things using some reason, some science. You know, a little common sense goes along the way too. So what I would I'm hoping with these issues I can get a good snapshot of the 14 candidates who are the major candidates who are still running for president. I'll give you a little breakdown on where on why I picked these 5 issues and where a skeptic might tend to look at that. I should really say that, as I really go back and emphasize again here, that in skepticism, there can be disagreements among skeptics on these. So climate change was really a no-brainer to put up here. I mean, this is the biggest environmental issue of our time, and the reason I put anthropomorphic is because the people who like to deny climate change is happening will use the argument that it is just natural, that humans aren't causing it. Evolution, Big Bang, evolution is one of my favorites because it's a core of biology and life sciences. Frankly, if you're running for political office and you believe Earth was created 6,000 years ago and Adam and Eve had a pet dinosaur like the Flintstones, I don't think you should be holding office. We get a little more, I do have a pointer here, so I don't have to point so much. We get a little more controversial with alternative medicine. But I think what we have to, everybody pretty much accepts is that in the last 100, 200 years, our lives are healthier, longer. Childhood diseases have been cut back, reduced, eliminated in some cases. And until you can get some alternative medicine concepts that can pass clinical field or clinical trial studies or blind studies, that this isn't really what the health of the country should be placed on. Then there's space exploration, science funding. That's basically NASA, and then some pure science research. you're not going to get, and a lot of science funding is actually over here. There's actually a lot of bipartisan support from Republicans and Democrats. They understand that the private enterprise isn't going to do something like the Hadron Collider. I mean, there's no profit to be made in that. But the information that might come out of there could change our lives and services and goods that are very productive. And then the other one that's going to be somewhat controversial are GMOs. And primarily what I'm talking about here is GMO labeling. The general feeling among skeptics is, as you get, like even with organic farming, is that while there's benefits, the benefits are generally overrated. And the fears that GMOs could cause are overrated. So we'll get into that. And I guess, oh yes, down here a little bit. Here are the remaining candidates. We just had George Pataki, a former New York governor, drop out, who is actually a little friendly to science. I have 3 Democrats and 11 Republicans. I put them in the order, basically where they're standing in the polls. So that is true. Trump, Ted Cruz, and Ben Carson are the 3 leaders of the Republicans. More about them as we talk about reason in a little bit. Now, I have tried my best I can to really get these candidates' positions down on here. I mean, I had to look back like on some of them, like on Jeb Bush on an issue going back to when he was a governor 10 or 12 years ago. He might have a different view now. Some of the sources I have, could have been off. But I do think I got a pretty good snapshot of what these candidates are going to stand with. So let's go right into some of these issues. Now, what I've done here is try to make things a little easier is I've tried to do a little color coding. This over here on the green is basically a position that's going to be, yes, anthropomorphic climate change is real. It's more the skeptics' position. Over here, you have people who say, no, we're going to an ice age or something or another. I don't know what they're saying. And down here, there's also going to be some down here you'll see in black. Those are names I put down. I just couldn't find a position on their issue on there. Fortunately, on this issue, everybody's got a position, although you got these ones in the brown here. And these are ones that have said something on this side and something on that side. I like to just call it the pandering position. So going on, talking about the panderers, for example, let's look at Rand Paul. Now, Rand Paul is one of the 2 doctors running for office. Should be kind of knowledgeable in science. A year ago, January 2015, Rand Paul voted in favor of the Hoven Amendment, which states that climate change is real and humans contribute to it. That's really good, Rand. That's what we like to see. Unfortunately, shortly after, he voted against the Schatz Amendment, which stated that humans have contributed significantly to climate change. So, what does Rand believe? I really have no idea. Get over here on some of these deniers, for example, and Donald Trump, for example. For Donald Trump, he doesn't really believe in climate change. No, he believes the concept of global warming was created by the Chinese in order to make U.S. manufacturing non-competitive. Strangely enough, the Chinese seem to believe in climate change too, so I don't know if that's going to work. And let's see. Oh, Mike Huckabee. Now, Mike Huckabee is an interesting situation because Huckabee, as you recall, ran for president in 2008. Back in 2008, he believed climate change was real and humans were causing it. In fact, he came out in favor of cap and trade. Unfortunately, I think he found out that people that tend to want to support him don't necessarily believe that way. Now, Huckabee is uncertain about climate change and has actually made the statement that a volcano in one blast will contribute more than 100 years of human activity to greenhouse gases. Actually, in 1 year, humans produce 100 times what volcanoes put out. So,
well, wait a minute, that's, the amount volcanoes put out is very irregular, like Krakatoa put out a lot, but in every...
Well, we do using averages, basically.
What average, though?
But even Krakatoa,
Yeah.
way below what humans put out.
Yeah, we're going to, as an average. I pulled this information right off of Phil Platt's article. So,
An average over 5 years or 1,000 years?
5,000 years. 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 5,000 years.
Phil didn't, Phil is a pretty prominent astronomer. He didn't quite say that in his article. I would suggest maybe researching that around, but there is no evidence out there that volcanoes are the primary source of global warming. Then we have Ted Cruz, and Ted is chair of the Senate Science, Space, and Competitive Subcommittee. Should be good on some science, but unfortunately he's not. Ted Cruz believes, you believe in global warming, you're a flat earther. And then we have the other person who is kind of in here with Paul Rand, is sort of in this middle pandering position, and that would be Jeb Bush, who, if you read this, I have no idea what he's saying. Climate change is changing, and then it's convoluted. I don't think science is clear of this. It's not unanimous about it being disproportionately man-made. Apparently, there's a proportional man-made part that's okay. And then, of course, he gets tired of the left because they believe in science. On this particular issue. And he doesn't, even though other Republicans agree with him as well. So I don't know where Jeb really stands. If we go to evolution, I could really only find one person that had a really definite position on evolution. That was Hillary Clinton. Now, maybe Bernie Sanders, Martin O'Malley, and these others do as well, but it isn't an issue that comes up a lot, so they don't have a record of stating anything. Sanders is actually the least religious of all the candidates running, so you can probably make an assumption up there, but I'm not trying to make assumptions. I'm doing enough already on these. Here's your panderers again, and over here are people who, well, don't believe in evolution at all. Let's see. In the middle here, interesting thing about Rand Paul is in college he was very prominent pro-evolutionist and would protest any creationist activities on his campus. As recently as a couple years ago, he's appearing before groups that have a lot of creationists, and he got a question about how old the Earth was. Paul Rand really didn't know how old the Earth was. Chris Christie takes this kind of middle ground. Evolution is required teaching. He stated, if there's a certain school district that wants to also teach creationism, that's not something we should decide in Trenton. He's the governor of New Jersey. Trenton is the capital. Let me see, I flipped the page here, wrong one. Let's see. John Kasich takes much the same position. Evolution and creation science should both be taught. Ben Carson. Ben Carson, of course, the other doctor, brilliant neurosurgeon, not so hot on the rest of science. I don't know how that's possible, but he says scientists do not know the age of the Earth because carbon dating and all those things really don't mean anything to a God who has the ability to create anything at any point in time. So I take that to mean that dinosaur bones and geological formations are just God playing a trick on all the scientists. Then we get down to Mr. Bush again, who happens to be in the pandering position. On evolution, as governor, it's not part of his standards, nor is creationism. And, I don't know what he believes. When asked by the Miami Herald whether he personally believes in evolution or not, Bush said, yeah, but I don't think it should actually be part of the curriculum. To be honest with you, and people have different points of views, and that can be discussed in school, but does not need to be part of the curriculum. I'm a practicing Catholic, and my own personal belief is God created man alive on earth. So as I try to recap Jeb's position, he believes in evolution, believes God created man and all life on earth. He does not believe personal belief should determine school standards, but he thinks that evolution should be part of the he does not think evolution should be part of the school curriculum because people have different personal beliefs. This man wants to be pander-in-chief. I just don't know how else. I mean, this and climate change, he's just not there. Then we have Marco Rubio, who stated, at the end of the day, I think there are multiple theories about how the universe was created, and this is a country where people should have the opportunity to teach them all.
Oh, yeah.
Whatever you want. When asked personally what his belief was on evolution, well, okay, thanks, Marco. So let's move on here to alternative medicine. I actually could not really find anybody who was really critical alternative medicine. John Kasich was the closest I could come to it, and he made a comparison to saying that people who support people like Trump and Ben Carson, who aren't politicians, for a high office is kind of the same with going to an alternative medicine practitioner if you're really sick. Instead of, so basically his view is that you should support a politician for a high office like that, somebody who has experience. Ted Cruz, oh my goodness. I forgot that, going back to evolution on Ted Cruz. I missed one part there. Ted Cruz refuses to give an answer on evolution, no matter how he's pressed. Totally refuses. Partially, it might be because his father is a real kook on, and I mean, I don't say that lightly. He's a real fundamentalist preacher who has called evolution a communist lie. So maybe Ted doesn't want to upset his father, or if he disagrees, or maybe he just realizes that it'd look pretty stupid to call it that and try to be president. So I don't know the position at all on these candidates. When you come to alternative medicine, let's see here. I put Hillary Clinton over here because I had to look at her personal lifestyle. And she and Bill have a close relationship with a pseudoscience practitioner called Dr. Mark Hyman. She also takes what has been determined to be just a useless supplement of a desiccated thyroid medication for herself. So I look at that and I got to say, she just doesn't seem to seems to have a little favoritism towards alternative medicine. Ben Carson, he's hawked pseudoscience medicines, a glyconutrient mix to treat cancer, autism, multiple sclerosis, and AIDS. When asked about that and his support of it during a recent debate, he said he didn't really have any association with the company. But as of 2013, he was hawking them. Huckabee, much the same thing. He's hawked a dietary supplement for diabetes, which has no basis. Donald Trump, probably of all these candidates, most friendly to anti-vaxxers. He's also engaged in selling a naturopathic weight loss supplement. He's also backed by a website called Natural News, which is run by a guy named Mike Adams, who is basically the equivalent and health area of Alex Jones and InfoWars. I think they're close buddies, and believe in chemtrails and a number of things. Let's see. Then we go. You can look at Bernie Sanders, which really was one of the ones that surprised me as much. Bernie Sanders is very, very pro-alternative medicine. He actually has spoken recently about integrating Chinese medicine into American healthcare system. He's responsible for including a lot of naturopathic theories and practices such as acupuncture and a few others into the Affordable Care Act. He was one of the main players in 1996 in getting naturopaths licensed in the state of Vermont. And give an idea here is, here's an event he put on a couple of years ago on complementary and alternative healthcare conference. He's really tried to push, and a lot of VA hospitals are getting more alternative medicine in there. And let's see.
What did you say about the VA hospitals?
He's spoken at a few of them around, like on Burlington, and has introduced people who are naturopaths, that they should be utilized more on other alternative, holistic medicine, Chinese medicine, different other things. Then we get back down here. Then the other one that I'm going to place in as somebody who is favorable to alternative medicine would be Jeb Bush. In 2000, Bush wrote and had an article written for an alternative medicine publication from a supporter of his. It was editor of that publication was a supporter of his. Apparently, the article got changed a little bit and sounded a little more pro-alternative medicine than it was, but still, Bush did allow one to go in there. He also had this 2003 proclamation, which you probably can't read here, but it says up in here, this is when he was governor, it endorsed herbalism, homeopathy, mind-body healing, energy healing, and refers to it down here as providing affordable, quality health care to the people of Florida. Then going back there, Ted Cruz was kind of in that pandering zone, and Ted Cruz has a whole different concept on alternative medicine and who should be deciding that for us. He introduced a bill called Senate Bill 2388, which under this bill, pharmaceutical companies could have have their drug approved, or it has to be reviewed by the FDA and approved or rejected within 30 days if that drug is approved in any one of 28 European countries, Israel, Australia, Canada, or Japan. If in that 30-day period the FDA does not approve this drug, then Congress will have the power to approve it by itself. And if you think some of the practitioners of alternative medicine are bad, well, think about Congress. So, then we get down here.
That was Ted Cruz?
Yes, Ted Cruz. Space exploration science funding. Pretty much a bipartisan support here on this side is really, very good. I got a few, strangely enough, you have Bernie Sanders, Carly Fiorina here in the middle. Over here you have people who really don't want to see too much on the funding increased. Bernie Sanders states that he wants to increase NASA funding, but he has a history of voting for NASA cuts. He does say he wants to increase science funding, so I kind of put him in the middle. Carly Fiorina, she talks about making space exploration a priority, but is really nebulous on the budgets, and it seems to want to have private enterprise involved in this a lot. So I kind of put them in the middle because they're just not really real clear on issues. Rand Paul, very clear, cut the NASA budget. Chris Christie, when asked about funding for space exploration, Christie felt that reforming the entitlement programs was more important. He said, "I'm sorry, but until we tackle this issue of entitlement reform, I'm not going to be increasing money for the space program." And then we have Donald Trump. Yeah.
Just because somebody is not big on science funding doesn't mean they're against science. They may prefer to have it done privately.
That might be, but what we're talking about here, if you're going to cut NASA funding and you're going to cut basic government research on funding, there's a lot of pure basic research we're talking about. It's not really going to be done at the private level because they're really only going to be doing things at the private level that are going to be involving products and something they can make money out of. You're not going to have a lot of theoretical research being done by major corporations. But what I'm really trying to put at here is I'm not saying Christie or Trump or Rand Paul is anti-science. Rand Paul's a doctor. I do understand he wants that. He just has a very libertarian view on government, wants to cut government. So, I don't think I said that they were anti-science, but anti-the science funding, the NASA development. Going back to Trump, Trump was asked about sending humans to Mars. And his response was, it's wonderful, but he wants to rebuild infrastructure first, so he doesn't believe in putting any more money into it. Now, if you really want to get into some people that are very pro and wanting to expand the budget a lot, there's Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz is very pro-NASA, sort of. He wants to really expand NASA funding in outer space. Earth studies, not so much. Why? Because Earth studies involves climate change. Yes, you had a question right there?
Most of NASA's funding is for the military, and I think we should solve our problems on Earth before we infect the rest of the universe.
Okay. Well, and a lot of, a lot of people think in that way, and perhaps that's where some of Bernie's and Carly Simon's position comes from. But that's a good bringing in for the next person I want to talk. If you want to talk about somebody who's very, very pro-NASA and wants funding, Marco Rubio would be a man. But as you know, people talk about how putting boots on the ground in Afghanistan or Iraq or Syria and don't want to do that, or they want to do that. Well, Marco wants to put boots on the ground too, on Mars. Now, obviously, I think he's not talking about sending the 101st Airborne there. He's talking about astronauts. But Marco Rubio also tweeted, "I will use American power to oppose any violations of international waters, airspace, cyberspace, or outer space." So, fits in well with your comment there, which was well timed at that point. So, and we come here to the next one that would be pretty controversial, and it's the GMOs. And it's kind of, everybody's kind of all over the place. I don't have any position on them. Clinton is supportive, Sanders is against. You have these Republicans in favor. I should say this is for GMO labeling, not just against GMOs, but for labeling. As a general rule, these people over here want labeling. These people do not. Clinton has said, "I stand in favor of using seeds and products that have a proven track record. There's a big gap between what facts are and what the perceptions are." Clinton noted that there are unwarranted fears surrounding GMOs because many people do not understand the science or biotechnology and are easily swayed by code words and misguided perceptions. Genetically modified sounds Frankensteinish. Drought resistant sounds really like something you want. Carly Fiorina also made statements that they're safe, the scientific evidence is clear. But I think one of the people that kind of touched upon the confusion that comes around a lot of this was Ben Carson. Now Carson actually, has said, as far as GMOs are concerned, there are a lot of GMOs, like broccoli. Broccoli is a GMO. Well, it depends how you want to read that. And corn could be a GMO too. I mean, corn and broccoli do not exist in nature. They're created over millennium of plant breeding and traditional plant breeding. But as he says, he's basically coming out in support of, this is something we've been doing for a long time. Yet, when it comes right down to it, this is just part of a very large quote that he made. He's in favor of the labeling because he wants people to have a choice, I guess, to see if something has been modified through gene technology instead of standard plant breeding. But really, the science is that DNA is really all the same. So, it kind of pretty much wraps it up. I did a little afterwards, not knowing how this was going to turn out with these candidates, a little idea of just seeing where they all fit on in here on these particular issues. And one candidate that was most likely in the green over all the others was actually Hillary Clinton, followed by John Kasich, the governor of Ohio, and Carly Fiorina. Then there were a bunch of them bunched together. Bernie Sanders tended to be down towards the bottom four, along with Ben Carson, Marco Rubio, and one of these candidates had a big fat zero on every scientific issue. Any suggestions? Donald Trump. So, any other questions anybody has? Yes?
Why are people against labeling of the food that we eat?
Sure. And I know this is going to be a controversial issue, and one of the reasons I want to put it up there, it's, what are you looking to find in the label?
Nutritional values.
Well, that's nobody's against that.
Chemicals.
Well, that's not what they're against on this, on the GMO labeling. That doesn't involve anything with chemicals or nutritional value. We're talking about just DNA. Whether you're doing it through traditional plant breeding or in gene technology through DNA, it's DNA. So in terms of what's going in, it's just DNA. Now, we know there's DNA in there.
but I still don't understand why they're against labeling it as such.
Labeling that there's DNA in the food?
That
No,
there is,
no. It's whether there's DNA from different organisms put in the DNA of an existing plant, say, an existing organism.
Why would that be different from, say, corn, which doesn't exist naturally?
I'm not saying there is any different, but what's wrong with
Okay.
labeling?
Well, see, then that's the point. Is that should we label broccoli and corn as genetically modified plants?
Don't have DNA inserted in them for different organisms. They've been, as you know, those have been selected over millennia.
Yes, but they're coming from different organisms because it's from other plants.
Well, okay, what about the example of what's called in some places golden rice, where you have genetic material from carrots inserted into rice so that people on low subsistence rice diets can get beta-carotene. Now, that of course involves, whether it's done, it's probably done artificially as opposed to plant breeding, by inserting.
Right.
Now, I think that's what, to some extent, that's what people who support this kind of warning.
Yeah, but why is there a concern about carrot DNA?
Well,
If you eat carrots.
I don't have any.
I understand, but I know what the point is.
But there are
Yes.
people who, without understanding the science behind it, really want to avoid, just in case it might be harmful to them, foods like that, because they didn't evolve naturally.
Well,
But although you can't really say what natural is, because you're talking about.
none of the agricultural products out there are natural, but that's, yeah.
Well, I guess there are people who just don't like the idea of gene
Correct.
splicing, and they're going to eat it. It may be irrational.
And this is why, simply like Hillary Clinton says, it really comes down to a lot of education. But I understand the point, and I understand what your concern around is there, and yours, what you're stating. But the scientific, yes, you want to have a question there?
No, I want to make a statement.
Yes, go ahead.
I usually tell people that I'll support labeling GMOs if they support labeling food fertilized with manure or shit, depending on how.
That's true.
That's disgusting.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Richard.
It seems to me that this issue is not about GMOs. It's about letting people know that the products are genetically modified insertion, or whatever you want to call it. And I think that's right. We have the right to know that. So what I think the government in not approving this would do would be suppress freedom of information. Which is, I'm against that. And I think that the other issue that bothers me is that a lot of these people who are against labeling are being funded. I don't know every one of them, but I know that some of them have taken donations from big corporations that deal with GMO.
Oh, I'm sure that's the case, because and I'm sure there's, you apply that with many different on the issues that.
So they're posturing.
Right. Oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry, I mean to cut you off there. Yes.
I was just going to say, not just to answer, if you don't mind, my thought on the labeling thing is that, to me, a label, it is the reason I would be against labeling is because of the lack of scientific understanding. Because if you're labeling something, if I see a label on cigarettes that says this may cause cancer, I know this is dangerous. If I see a label on something, water, and it says this contains, hydrogen, whatever, like, oh my God, what does that mean? To me, that's automatically, when there's a label, it infers or implies that there's something wrong with it, or there's something dangerous behind it. So when you're labeling something that just says this has this, automatically, oh, well, why did they have to put a label on it then? There must be something wrong with it. And I think if it was my product that had zero evidence showing that it was something wrong with it, and I had to put a label on it saying, warning, this has nothing wrong with it. Like, wait a second.
Yeah.
That to me is the biggest issue.
Just a second. I want to get Robin.
There's an infinite number of different possibilities of genetic splicing or genetic modification.
True.
And some of them might be very, very beneficial, and some of them might be very, very harmful. For example, the carrots making rice more nutritious for poor people, that's a fantastic idea. And I can't imagine a negative aspect to that. But on the other hand, if you have Monsanto making a plant, corn, for example, more resistant to a herbicide,
Absolutely.
then maybe you're gonna cause uptake of a harmful chemical that's gonna be stored in the corn and then fed to cows. I don't know, maybe makes sense, so maybe there's a bad effect there. But I think in terms of a political controversy, it's fraught with peril on both sides. We have crazy people on the left who say everything should be labeled and everything that's not natural is harmful. And then you have corporates on the right saying, it's all fine, don't worry about it. So, but I think there's so much more science that needs to be conducted, and it's not really being conducted scientifically, it's being conducted politically.
Right, that's a very good point, and that's where I think a lot of with the GMOs, they need to be viewed individually as they come along with the technologies, like the one you pointed out. Okay, one more. Well, I know this gentleman had his hand up over here.
That's the last question.
Yes, okay.
Well, it seems like there's a lot of stigma attached to GMOs, and you would probably know better, but I know she was mentioning how with some seeds they would incorporate a pesticide,
Yes.
so you wouldn't have to deal with whatever rodents or weeds
Right.
or whatever. And I vaguely remember sometimes when they would modify organisms, they would put certain types of genes into like viruses and let them loose and let the viruses attach the genes to other organisms. I know for a while there, they were doing all kinds of crazy stuff with chemicals and radiation to modify certain elements of DNA. So all those things sound pretty scary. You know, you're thinking, okay, radiation, pesticides, chemicals, all these other things. So it's got kind of a shady history,
Right.
and if you're aware of that, it makes you want to, use some caution when you come across.
Well, it needs to be well regulated. I totally agree. I myself, 30 years ago, was involved in opposition to some genetic engineering experiments here in Monterey County. I was really at the forefront on that, and kind of even went back and testified with a congressional subcommittee and went around the state on a few things. So I mean, I had a lot of concerns. I wasn't against the technology, but I really didn't like the regulatory process was because it was very secretive. So I think when you look at this, this is a powerful, powerful technology. But you just can't make blanket decisions left one way or the other. And one, big advantages like this is rice. It's going to save millions of children from being blind.
Yeah, but if you have a competitive environment, like you have the fracking, they put in God knows what kind of chemicals in the water and they pump in the ground. They're not going to reveal what that is. The government wants to find out, but it's a big secret because it's a trade secret. And I would think with chemical companies or whatever, produce companies like Monsanto, they're not going to reveal what they do or how they modify DNA just so other people will follow suit.
Well, and that's, but that's where it needs some regulations going. So I'm sorry, they're cutting me off just like at a presidential debate.